modest elderly woman was overlooked at the shooting range. They had no idea who she used to be. The Pleasant Valley Shooting Club buzzed with noise on a cold Monday morning. Men with serious faces checked their guns and talked about scores. No one noticed when the door opened slowly. An old woman stepped inside. She wore a simple blue cardigan and had white hair tied neatly in a bun. Her name was Dorothy, and she was 82 years old. The young man at the front desk looked up and frowned. His name tag said, Robert. He was not used to seeing old ladies. At the shooting club. Can I help you? Robert asked in a loud voice, as if Dorothy could not hear well. I would like to shoot today, Dorothy said quietly. Her voice was soft but clear. Her blue eyes were bright and sharp. Robert looked at the two men standing nearby. They all shared a small smile as if they thought this was funny. Ma'am, have you ever used a gun before? Robert asked slowly. This is not like knitting or baking. Cakes. The two men laughed. Dorothy did not seem upset. She just nodded and placed some money on the counter. Yes, I have used guns before, she said. I would like lane number 5, please. Robert looked unsure. He pushed a form toward her. You need to fill this out first, and I should explain the safety rules to you. Dorothy filled out the form with steady hands. Her handwriting was neat and small. Thank you, but I know the safety rules very well. Robert still looked worried. The guns here are quite heavy, ma'am. They have a strong kick. Maybe you would like something lighter? Dorothy smiled politely. The standard rental will be fine. The men watched as she walked to lane 5. They expected her to struggle. They expected her to be scared of the noise. They were wrong. Dorothy put on safety glasses and ear protection. She loaded the gun with careful, practiced movements. Her hands did not shake at all. She stood straight, took a deep breath, and fired. The bullet hit the center of the target. She fired again, and again. Every bullet hit the same spot, making one bigger hole in the middle of the target. Her face stayed calm, as if this was nothing special. A few people from other lanes started to notice. They stopped shooting and watched her instead. No one made jokes anymore. After 20 minutes, Dorothy finished her practice. She carefully made the gun safe and cleaned up her area. She nodded politely to Robert as she left. Same time on Wednesday? She asked. Robert could only nod, his mouth slightly open in surprise. After she left, the club was filled with questions. Who was that? Asked one of the men who had laughed earlier. I don't know, said Robert. But did you see her shooting? Perfect. Scores every time. Maybe she got lucky, said the other man. An older man who had been watching from lane 7 shook his head. That wasn't luck. That was skill from years of practice. I wonder who she really is. No one knew that Dorothy Wilson had once been the best shooter in the country. No one knew about her gold medals or her world records. No one knew that she had taught shooting to special forces for 30 years. They just saw an old woman in a cardigan. Dorothy walked home slowly, enjoying the fresh air. She smiled to herself. It felt good to shoot again after so many years. After her husband William died last month, she had decided to start living again, to do the things that once made her happy. I'll be back, William, she whispered to the sky. I'm not finished yet. In her quiet house, on a shelf that no one saw, sat 3 Olympic gold medals, gathering dust. Dorothy made herself tea and looked at the old photo of herself in uniform, standing tall on the winner's platform. Tomorrow she would go back, not to show off, not to tell them who she was, just to feel the balance of the gun in her hands again, to find that perfect moment of calm before the shot. They had no idea who she used to be, and that was just fine with Dorothy. A modest elderly woman was overlooked at the shooting range. They had no idea who she used to be. For 2 weeks, Dorothy came to the Pleasant Valley Shooting Club every Monday and Wednesday. She always wore simple clothes, sometimes her blue cardigan, sometimes a gray sweater. She never spoke much to anyone. She would nod politely, go to her lane, practice for exactly 1 hour, and then leave. Robert, the young man at the desk, stopped, making jokes about her. He would just hand her the paperwork and say, Lane 5 is ready for you, Mrs. Wilson. He had learned her name from the forms she filled out, but he still knew nothing about her past. One Wednesday, a new member came to the club. His name was Thomas. He was tall with gray hair and had once been in the army. He watched Dorothy shoot with perfect aim for 10 minutes before he walked over to her lane. "Excuse me," he said when she finished a round. "Your technique is excellent. May I ask where you learned to shoot like that?" Dorothy turned to look at him. For a moment, she seemed to be thinking about whether to answer. "My husband taught me," she said finally. "A long time ago." Thomas smiled. "He must have been very good." "The best," Dorothy said, and for the first time, the club members saw her smile. It changed her whole face, making her look younger. That same day, a young woman named Emma joined the club. She was in her 20s and wanted to learn to shoot for a police exam. Robert gave her lane 6, right next to Dorothy. Emma struggled. Her hands shook and she missed the target completely several times. She looked close to tears after 30 minutes of trying. Dorothy watched from the corner of her eye. Finally, she put down her gun and turned to the young woman. "You're breathing wrong," Dorothy said quietly. Emma looked surprised that someone was speaking to her. "What? You're breathing. You're holding your breath when you shoot. That makes your hands shake." Dorothy's voice was kind but firm. "Try taking a slow breath in, then let half of it out. Hold it there, then squeeze the trigger gently." Emma looked unsure but tried Dorothy's advice. Her next shot hit the edge of the target. Not perfect, but much better than before. "Thank you," Emma said with a big smile. "That really helped." Dorothy nodded and went back to her own practice. But the next time Emma came to the club, she asked if she could use lane 6 again, next to the nice older lady. Soon, other members noticed how well Emma was improving. When they asked her secret, she pointed to Dorothy. "She gives me tips sometimes. She's amazing." One day, Thomas brought an old magazine to the club. He had been thinking about Dorothy's perfect shooting and something had clicked in his memory. He searched through his old things at home and found what he was looking for. As Dorothy was packing up to leave, Thomas approached her with the magazine. "Mrs. Wilson, I hope you don't mind, but I wanted to ask you something." He opened the magazine to a page with a photo of a young woman in shooting competition clothes holding a medal. The woman had Dorothy's eyes and smile. "Is this you?" The club went quiet. Everyone looked at the photo, then at Dorothy. Dorothy looked at the picture for a long moment. "Yes," she said finally. "That was a long time ago. You're Dorothy Wilson, the champion shooter from the 1970s, Thomas said with respect in his voice. 3-time Olympic medal winner. You were famous." Dorothy shook her head slightly. "I was just good at something I loved." Robert came over and looked at the magazine. His face turned red with embarrassment as he remembered how he had treated her on her first day. "Why didn't you tell us who you are?" he asked. Dorothy picked up her bag. "I'm just an old woman who likes to shoot," she said. "If the past is the past." But as she walked to the door, Emma called out, "Mrs. Wilson, would you teach me more, please?" Dorothy stopped at the door. Without turning, she said, "Wednesday, 9 o'clock. Don't be late." And for the first time in many years, Dorothy felt a spark of something new, purpose. A modest elderly woman was overlooked at the shooting range. They had no idea who she used to be. The next Wednesday, Emma arrived at the Pleasant Valley Shooting Club at 8:45. She was nervous and excited at the same time. When she walked in, Dorothy was already there, sitting calmly at a small table in the corner. "Good morning," Dorothy said. "You're early." "That's good," Emma smiled. "I didn't want to be late for my first lesson." To Emma's surprise, Dorothy did not lead her to the shooting range right away. Instead, she placed an unloaded gun on the table. "Before we shoot, we learn," Dorothy said firmly. "Show me how you hold it." For the next 30 minutes, Dorothy taught Emma the basics that no one had ever properly explained to her: how to stand, how to breathe, how to focus her eyes. They did not fire a single shot. "This is the foundation," Dorothy explained. "The shot begins long before you pull the trigger." By now, other club members had started to arrive. They tried not to stare, but everyone was watching the Olympic champion teaching the young woman. Robert even turned down the radio so he could hear Dorothy's quiet instructions. When they finally moved to lane 5, Dorothy stood behind Emma and watched her carefully. "Remember what I taught you," she said. "Breathe. Focus. Squeeze gently." Emma's first shot hit near the center of the target. Her face lit up with pride. "Better," Dorothy said with a small nod. "Now do it again. 10 times the same way." As they practiced, more and more club members stopped to watch. Thomas stood nearby, smiling at how Dorothy's teaching style reminded him of his old army training days. After an hour, Dorothy said, "That's enough for today." "When can we have another lesson?" Emma asked quickly. Dorothy thought for a moment. "Monday and Wednesday. Same time." As Dorothy packed up her things, Thomas approached her. "Mrs. Wilson," he said, "would you consider teaching a class here? Not just for Emma, but for anyone who wants to learn from a champion." Dorothy looked surprised. "I'm not a teacher, Mr. Thomas, I'm just helping the girl." "You're a natural teacher," Thomas insisted. "And there's so much we could all learn from you." Dorothy shook her head. "I'll think about it," she said, which everyone knew probably meant no. The next Monday, Dorothy arrived at the club carrying a worn leather case. No one had seen her bring this before. The regular members watched curiously as she signed in. "What's in the case, Mrs. Wilson?" Robert asked. "My own gun," Dorothy replied simply. She walked to lane 5 where Emma was waiting. Dorothy opened the case to reveal a beautiful competition rifle. It was old but perfectly maintained, with a smooth wooden stock that glowed with years of care. "This was William's gift to me when I won my first gold medal," Dorothy explained as she assembled it with practiced hands. "Today, I will show you what it can do." Dorothy's demonstration left everyone in the club speechless. Her shooting was beyond perfect. The precision, the control, the calmness. It was like watching an artist create a masterpiece. After she finished, there was a moment of complete silence in the club. Then Thomas started to clap. Others joined in. Dorothy looked embarrassed by the attention. "Mrs. Wilson," the club owner, Mr. George, said as he walked up to her, "I've owned this place for 25 years, and I've never seen shooting like that. Would you consider becoming our head instructor? We would be honored." Dorothy's face showed surprise, then uncertainty. "I'm too old for that," she said. "Age doesn't matter," Mr. George replied. "Skill and knowledge do. And you have more of both than anyone I've ever met." Dorothy looked around at the faces watching her. Emma's excitement, Thomas's respect, Robert's admiration. For the first time in many years, she felt needed again. Useful, important. "I will need to think about it," she said. But this time, her voice suggested she might actually consider it. As she packed up her rifle, Emma helped her. "Why did you stop competing?" Emma asked quietly. Dorothy's hands paused for a moment. "Life happens," she said finally. "William's health got bad. We had bills to pay. Sometimes dreams have to wait." "But you were the best," Emma said. Dorothy smiled sadly. "Being the best isn't always enough, dear. Sometimes life has other plans." A modest elderly woman was overlooked at the shooting range. They had no idea who she used to be. The news about Dorothy Wilson spread quickly around Pleasant Valley. By Friday, the shooting club had more visitors than usual. Some came to practice, but most came hoping to see the legendary shooter who had been hiding in plain sight among them. Dorothy noticed the extra attention, but ignored it. She focused on teaching Emma, who was improving quickly under her guidance. Their lessons had become the highlight of Dorothy's week. "You have natural talent," Dorothy told Emma one day after a particularly good session. "With practice, you could compete at a high level." Emma's eyes lit up. "Do you really think so? That would be amazing." Dorothy nodded. "But talent is not enough. You need discipline and hard work. Every day. not just when you feel like it. As they were talking, Mr. George approached them. "Mrs. Wilson, may I have a word?" Dorothy followed him to his office. On his desk was an old photo album. "My father started this club 40 years ago," Mr. George explained. "He kept photos of all the important visitors." He opened the album and pointed to a yellowed photograph. It showed a much younger Dorothy shaking hands with Mr. George's father. Behind them was a banner that read, "Pleasant Valley welcomes Olympic champion Dorothy Wilson." "You were here before," Mr. George said. "In 1976, right after your gold medal win." Dorothy touched the photo gently. "Yes, your father was very kind to me and William. I had forgotten about that day." "Why did you come back after all these years, and why didn't you tell anyone who you are?" Dorothy sighed. "William died 3 months ago. We were married for 53 years. Her voice was steady, but her eyes showed her pain. "I needed something to fill my days, something familiar. When I was young, shooting gave me purpose. I thought maybe it could again." Mr. George nodded with understanding. "And you didn't tell anyone because I'm not that person anymore," Dorothy said. "That young woman with medals and records, she's gone. I'm just an old woman trying to find a reason to get up in the morning." Mr. George smiled kindly. "I disagree. I think that young woman is still there. I've seen her when you shoot, and when you teach." Dorothy didn't respond. "The offer to become our instructor is still open," Mr. George said. "We need someone like you." Dorothy looked at the photo again. "I'll think about it," she said, but her voice was softer now. That evening, as Dorothy made tea in her quiet kitchen, her phone rang. It was Emma. "Mrs. Wilson, I need your help," Emma said, her voice urgent. "The police exam is in 2 weeks, and I'm still not consistent enough. Could you give me extra lessons?" Dorothy thought about her empty calendar and lonely house. "Come tomorrow at 9, she said. "We'll work on your consistency." For the next 2 weeks, Dorothy and Emma met every day. Dorothy was strict but patient. She corrected Emma's smallest mistakes and praised her improvements. She shared techniques she had developed during her competition years. The day before the exam, Emma was nervous. "What if I fail?" she asked. Dorothy put her hand on Emma's shoulder. "You won't fail. You've put in the work. Now trust yourself." Emma looked at her teacher with respect. "How did you handle pressure during competitions?" Dorothy smiled. "I reminded myself that each shot is just one moment, one breath, one squeeze of the trigger, nothing more." As Emma was leaving, she hugged Dorothy suddenly. "Thank you for everything." Dorothy stiffened at first, then returned the hug awkwardly. It had been a long time since anyone had hugged her. "Good luck tomorrow," she said, "though you won't need it." After Emma left, Dorothy went home and opened a box she had kept closed since William's death. Inside were her newspaper clippings and competition photos. At the bottom was a letter William had written to her before her first Olympic competition. "Remember who you are," he had written. "Not just a shooter, but a teacher, someone who lifts others up." Dorothy wiped away a tear. William had always seen something in her that she couldn't see in herself. The next morning, Dorothy arrived at the club early. To her surprise, Mr. George was waiting for her with papers in his hand. "I've drawn up a contract," he said, "for our new head instructor." Dorothy took the papers without a word. A modest elderly woman was overlooked at the shooting range. They had no idea who she used to be. 1 month later, the Pleasant Valley Shooting Club looked very different. A new sign hung by the entrance. "Champions class with Dorothy Wilson, Tuesdays and Thursdays." The waiting list for these classes grew longer each week. Dorothy stood tall at the front of the range, watching her students practice. She wore a proper shooting jacket now, a gift from the club members. At 82, she was the oldest instructor in the county, but no one questioned her authority. Her quiet voice carried weight that made even the most stubborn students listen. "Remember," she told her class, "shooting is not about strength. It's about balance, focus, patience. Among her students were police officers, competition shooters, and beginners like Emma had once been. Dorothy gave each person the same careful attention, correcting their stance with gentle hands that never shook. Emma visited whenever she could. She had passed her police exam with top scores and was now in training. "I couldn't have done it without you," Emma told Dorothy during one visit. Dorothy shook her head. "You did the work. I just showed you how." After class one Thursday, Mr. George called Dorothy to his office. A man in a smart suit was waiting there. "Mrs. Wilson, this is Mr. Peter from the National Shooting Association," Mr. George explained. "He has something to discuss with you." Mr. Peter smiled warmly. "Mrs. Wilson, we're organizing a special event to honor the champions of the past. We would be honored if you would attend as our guest of honor." Dorothy looked uncomfortable. "I don't do public events anymore," she said. "Please consider it," Mr. Peter said. "Many young shooters today don't know the history of our sport, don't know about pioneers like you, a woman who broke records when few women competed." Dorothy was quiet for a long moment. "I will think about it," she said finally. That evening, Dorothy sat in her living room looking at old photos. One showed her and William after her final competition. She had not won that day, but William's proud smile was the same as when she won gold. Her phone rang. It was Thomas from the club. "Mrs. Wilson, I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said. "I wanted to ask if you've heard from Emma." Dorothy frowned. "Not since Tuesday. Why?" "She failed her final physical test today," Thomas explained. "She's very upset, said she's giving up." Dorothy's face hardened with determination. "Where is she now?" 20 minutes later, Dorothy knocked on the door of Emma's small apartment. Emma's eyes were red from crying when she opened the door. "Mrs. Wilson, what are you doing here?" "May I come in?" Dorothy asked. Emma's apartment was small but neat. Dorothy sat at the kitchen table while Emma made tea. "Thomas told me what happened," Dorothy said. Emma looked down at her hands. "I failed. I wasn't fast enough on the obstacle course." "So you're giving up?" Emma nodded miserably. "Maybe I'm not meant to be a police officer." Dorothy's voice became firm. "Let me tell you something. I lost my first competition, and my second. I came last in both. Do you know what William said to me?" Emma shook her head. He said, "Losing shows you where you need to work harder." So I worked harder. I practiced every day until my hands bled. Dorothy reached into her bag and pulled out something gold that caught the light. Her Olympic medal. "I bring this today to remind you, success doesn't come from never failing. It comes from getting up when you fail." Emma touched the medal with wonder. "It's beautiful." "It's just metal," Dorothy said. "The real prize was knowing I didn't give up." She put her hand over Emma's. "Don't give up, Emma." 2 weeks later, Dorothy stood on a stage at the National Shooting Association event. The room was filled with young shooters eager to meet the legend. As she looked out at their faces, Dorothy felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Pride. In the front, row sat Emma beaming. She had passed her test on the second try. "Today we honor a champion," the announcer said. But Dorothy Wilson is more than her medals. She is a teacher, a mentor, a woman who shows us that age is just a number, and it's never too late to make a difference. As Dorothy stepped up to the microphone, she thought of William. "I'm not finished yet," she whispered. And she wasn't. This was just the beginning of her new chapter.